Good morning, dear students. Today's topic is interest, meaning of interest, types of interest, and classical theory of interest. What is interest? It is payment made for the use of money. It is an income derived from lending funds for a lender who gives the loan and charge for the borrower who was in need of money. It means it is a payment made by the borrower to the lender for the use of capital. So, actually interest is a reward for capital. Come to the next point. There are two types of interest. One is gross interest and another one is net interest. What is gross interest and what is net interest? So, net interest is a pure interest which is paid for the use of capital only. What is net interest? It is a pure interest which is paid for the use of only capital. Then what is gross interest? It refers to the total amount which includes not only payment for the use of capital but also payment for the use of valuable services. So, gross interest includes reward for all other services rendered by that particular person. Take for example, see the picture. So, net interest, it is a pure interest. So, what is gross interest? So, it includes the services given here, reward for inconvenience, reward for keeping accounts, reward for risk taking. Take for example, insurance against list. The lender has to bear the risk of loss of capital lending. And one more interesting thing, expenses of management he has to bear. The money lender has to incur certain expenses for keeping the book accounts, etc. And reward for inconvenience is always there. So, lender undertakes trouble and inconvenience in providing capital. So, there is a difference between net interest and gross interest. Net interest is a pure interest and gross interest which includes the reward for all other services. So, net interest, it is the part of gross interest. So, come to the next point. So, that is very interesting, classical theory of interest. So, this is also known as real theory of interest. So, what this theory states? According to this theory, rate of interest is determined by the intersection of demand and supply of savings. Once again I will repeat, what is the hint of the theory? According to this theory, interest is determined by the intersection of demand and supply of savings. So, it is also called as a real theory. So, how the rate of interest is determined? So, the rate of interest is determined according to the demand for capital and supply of capital. Okay, what are the basic assumptions of this theory? So, generally there is a full employment, household are the net savers and producers are the net borrowers. So, no government intervention. Once again I will repeat, full employment situation is there. So, all the resources are used. Households are the net savers and producers are the net borrowers. Then come to the next point, how the rate of interest is determined. So, before going to discuss, first we should know the demand for capital and supply of capital. The demand for capital means, that means demand for savings. So, demand for savings comes from those who want to invest money in business. Demand for investment is derived demand. So, that means the demand for the factor is high when there are higher expectations. So, when expectations are good, then definitely the demand for savings is more. So, demand for capital mostly comes from the entrepreneurs who want it for productive purposes. So, it means the demand for capital depends upon the productivity of the capital. The demand for capital depends upon the productivity. So, you take for example, so if the productivity is more, then definitely entrepreneurs invest more. If the productivity is less, then definitely entrepreneurs invest less. And the rate of interest differs inversely with the productivity of capital. Once again I will repeat, rate of interest inversely, that is, varies with the productivity of capital. Example, the entrepreneur goes on employing more of capital so long as the productivity is high than the rate of interest. But one thing is 100% sure, as more and more units of capital applied, then definitely the productivity comes down. That means marginal productivity of capital is considered here. The entrepreneur will stop that point where the productivity of the last unit that is equal to the rate of interest. Therefore, the marginal productivity of capital is the very important factor which determines the demand for capital. The demand for capital definitely depends upon marginal productivity. If the marginal productivity is higher, the demand is also higher. If the marginal productivity is lower, then the demand is also less. Therefore, the marginal productivity curve slopes downward from left to right. That is the very interesting factor. Once again I will repeat, the demand for capital or savings that depends upon the marginal productivity of capital. If the marginal productivity of capital is more than the rate of interest, then definitely the demand is more, vice versa. So, the demand for capital is the basic element which determines the classical theory of interest. Okay. Then come to the next point, supply of savings. So, the supply of savings or the supply of capital that depends upon so many interesting things. Take for example, people's power and willingness to save, and the power to save that depends upon one's income, and the powers to save that depends upon banking facilities, taxation, etc. You take for example, powers to save. Power to save, it definitely depends upon the income level. So, when the income level is more, ability to earn is more, then definitely people save more. Then if banking facilities are good, or the banking industry is working in a systematic way, or it induces the people to save more, or it gives idea about the saving, or if the banking institutions create more interest among the customers to invest their money or to save their money, then definitely the people's interest increases and they save more. And the taxation also is the very interesting factor. If taxes are less, then definitely people save more. If taxes are high, then definitely their part of income that goes to tax. Therefore, the power, that is also a very important factor which determines the supply of capital. Then come to the next one, that is willingness to save. And this willingness to save is also depends upon different factors. You take for example, law and order in the country, then future prospects and expectation about the future, etc. Savings involves our sacrifice, that means of present consumption. Savings are nothing but the residual part of our income. So, S is equal to Y minus C. Saving refer to that part of income which is not spent on consumption. And generally we know that people naturally prefer present consumption to future one, because we all know that nothing is permanent and uncertainty is there. People have to induce to save more. It means they must be rewarded properly. So, these all are the very interesting factor. And size of personal income, size of family. If the size of family is bigger one and the income is less, then there is no chance to save, etc. And affection towards family. If affection towards family is more, then definitely we spend more on our family. So, these all are the very interesting factors that determines the supply of capital or supply of savings. And on the basis of these all, let us try to know how the rate of interest is determined. See the example here. So, on one column rate of interest given, and on the other hand saving in crores that is given. So, if the rate of interest is 10%, then definitely people save more, that is 1000, like that. As the rate of interest goes on declining, savings also goes on declining. Okay, on the basis of this example, let us know the equilibrium of rate of interest. So we know that according to classical theory, equilibrium interest rate is restored at a point where demand for and supply of capital both are equal. Once again I will repeat. The rate of interest that is determined or restored at a point where demand for capital and supply of capital are equal. So let us take the example once again. First column, rate of interest is given, that means investment and saving is given, then the rate of interest is given. Take for example, when the rate of interest is 10%, investment is 500 only, that is in terms of crores. Higher the rate of interest and lower the investment level, but savings are more, see the third column. And second one, when 9, then investment is only 600, it increases and savings goes on declining. So opposite relationship between investment and saving. So at 8% of rate of interest, investment, that is equal to savings. So this is the best point where the rate of interest is restored, and this is explained with the help of this given diagram. So we all know that see here in the column, the supply is more when the rate of interest is more, that means savings are more. At 10% the savings are 1000 and 5% the savings are only 400. That means higher the rate of interest, higher will be the supply, lower the rate of interest, lower will be the supply. And on the other hand, the demand for capital, that means for investment, higher the rate of interest, lower the demand, lower the rate of interest and higher will be the demand. Therefore, see in this diagram, the demand curve, that means capital that slopes downward from left to right, opposite relation is there, and the supply curve that rises upward, and intersection is given at point E, that is the equilibrium point. A rate of interest is restored at point E. And take for example, at a 10 rate of interest, that means supply is more and demand is less, and rate of interest is 6, and definitely demand is more and supply is less. And come to the point, final conclusion, the rate of interest is determined and where both are equal. At point E, both are equal. So this is about the classical theory of interest. Okay, come to the next point. As a few criticisms are there. The theory is based upon the full employment, just we discussed while discussing assumptions. But in practical life, resources are not fully employed. And theory is also states that people have to reduce consumption if they want to save more. How is it possible? It is not possible in a practical life. And this theory believes that equilibrium between saving and investment is brought about by changes in the rate of interest. Just we discussed with the help of that table. When the rate of interest is 10, then savings are more, and when the rate of interest is less, savings are less. But this is wrong. According to Keynes, equilibrium between saving and investment is brought about not by changes in the rate of interest, but by changes in the level of income. This is the that is criticism given by Keynes. And this theory also assumes that demand for investment changes without affecting savings, but this is not correct. Again, Keynes criticized this point. So this theory is indeterminate. So this is about the brief explanation of classical theory of interest and about interest, gross interest and net interest. And the short question and long question is also there on this topic for 2 marks. So what is gross interest and net interest, or distinction between gross interest and net interest is given for short question. And for long question, explain the theory of classical theory of interest with example and given diagram. So friends, go through these all important points. Yes, stay happy.